Welcome to the fourth installment of CloudTalk this week. Here with me, my boy Brian Fanzo, iSocial Fans, and myself, Dan Newman. We're excited to have the fourth episode. And after three, right, Brian, having had guests on the show, we said, you know what, we want to do a quick pause, time out, and say, hey, we wanted to just have a chance to engage a little bit more with our social communities on Twitter. Start a dialogue and actually talk about something that I think is very near and dear to both you and myself. And that's, going beyond just cloud and starting to kind of talk about how wearable technology and how we sort of as humans who are constantly attached to our devices are sort of shaping what the future of technology, big data, mobile, and cloud are really going to be. So kicking off the fourth episode really today, it's going to be wearable tech, the Internet of Things, and how we sort of are the future data center. So again, Brian Fanzo, Dan Newman here, CloudTalk, and before we get started, just a quick shout out to our friends at IBM Midmarket and Avnet Cloud Ready. Did I get that right? Avnet Cloud Ready?
Yep, you were right.
And want to thank you guys as always for being a part of this show. So,
yeah,
Brian,
this is
what's going
exciting.
on?
It's exciting. I am definitely, we've had some exciting guests on, and the two of us, we're not afraid to talk, and we also like to kind of geek out. So this is definitely one that we will be able to geek out to today. And I made sure to bring some of my wearable technology there on my wrist, so everybody can actually see. Actually, the original iWatch is what I have there on in the middle. So I'm excited to talk. The whole point of this Cloud Talk when we started was to really get the community engaged and being able to talk with the community. So I think the theme of this talk today, although we have some framed questions for the two of us going back and forth, especially stemming from your article about the Human Datacenter, which I worked for a little over 3 years or almost 3 years in a data center, a real data center, not a human data center. But I think that's a fascinating concept and should be a great conversation. So I'm excited to get this kicked off, and I think we'll jump into question one. And then those on Twitter and on Google Plus, feel free to ask your own questions, submit some things in there if you have some things that you're curious what our thoughts are when it comes to cloud tech, pretty much anything that has to do with I call getting my geek on. So I have some gadgets with me that I've brought. I have a Raspberry Pi and some other cool devices that I'd love to talk about as we get moving. So that first question, Daniel, I guess this is a good one for you. Like, we are both millennials. I think we are less than 30 days apart when it comes to age, but yes, you are the oldest. But I have more hair, so maybe that's where I win that battle. But
what can you tweet that you win because you have more hair?
Hair beats age by 30. So
my hair's been growing a long time, man. It left me.
So what emerging technology that's out there today is most exciting for you?
Well, it seems like I should make a joke about hair transplant technology, right? But
that'd be good. That would have been a good segment.
I don't do this by choice, Brian. I get excited, and I think the one thing, and maybe our audience doesn't know, is because we kind of are seen for our social and media and marketing, and that we're both really tech geeks and tech lovers that have been around tech communities for our career. My career was in communications and collaboration. So, one is I'm extremely excited about the opportunity to integrate our lives outside of our time online into the data and social experience. So I think that's kind of why I talk about the Human Data Center and wearables, which we'll get more into later. But I'm super excited about how can we actually get the benefits of social without actually having to constantly have our faces down in our devices. So I'm looking forward to any technology that sort of allows us to share and be social, but yet actually engaged in our current situation. Because you go to conferences and everything, and all of our time is spent face down in our iPads because we're so eager to share our experience with the people we're not with that I sometimes think we're sort of missing the experience that we're actually having and the people we are with. So I'm excited about how technology is shaping that, for sure.
That's interesting. I mean, I think that's interesting because you almost have to then balance the idea that if you want it to be more, I would say, automated or even more innate, you have to be willing to give up some of that privacy and some of that elements. Because I'm the same way. Like, for me, I really like Foursquare and Swarm, those apps where you're checking in on your phone and locations, because I like not only to brag or broadcast where I'm eating, but I like to, looking back, I often will go through what I've eaten at a certain restaurant to know what I'm going to order the next time. And one of the things that always bothered me is I have to go into my phone, go into the check-in, so if that was proximity checking, or if I was enabling it and saying, hey, when I go into these restaurants, check in for me, a little bit of that would be great for me, but it scares the heck out of the privacy people and the security side. So what do you think? I mean, I agree. We're all live tweeting and live interacting, and I had Google Glass for a while, and Google Glass to me, it was still not something that fit in my workflow or my day-to-day life. But I agree. The idea of socially sharing without taking away from the in-person experience would definitely be some exciting technology.
That's a great question to maybe ping out to the audience too. Is what does everybody think about Google killing Glass? Just sort of as a sidebar to our talk, because we're going to get into wearables more. But
yeah.
I think that nobody's going to be completely surprised, but at the same time, that seemed to be a real differentiator for Google was Glass. And basically, they just sort of, I wouldn't say set wearables back, but they sort of said we're changing directions on wearables. And that kind of goes back to maybe what I'm excited about next is less intrusive technology, because that was the one thing about Glass is it was kind of intrusive.
Well, yeah, and I remember the very first time I ever wore it out at lunch, and just to put it in some context, we were using Google Glass at my last facility, my last job. We were actually using it to visualize heat signatures inside of a data center module, which was pretty cool. That instead of me having to walk in with my iPad and being able to hold my iPad camera up and see heat signatures, I was able to do that visually. So when I was talking and giving demonstrations, I could tell them which servers were on. I mean, so there was some really cool technology that I was, using in the technology space. But the weird part was I remember the very first time I went to lunch with a group of us, and three of the six of us had Google Glass on, and I remember getting the weird looks, and when I looked over at a couple of people, they shrugged and turned their head immediately because they wouldn't know if I was taking a picture of them, if I was doing a live video. So I think that part of it almost is probably what scares the consumer on just as much as the awkwardness of wearing. If I'm not a glasses person, I've never worn glasses, so me wearing glasses indoors was also something that took a while to get used to.
I just always wanted to wear them out once so someone could call me a glass hole.
Well, I think it's always funny because I took a picture. We passed them around our data center, and everyone was taking pictures with them on, and so many of them still have that as their avatar. But yet I don't think they've ever worn them more than that one time. So I don't know if I would want to brag about that. I wonder if they're changing their avatars now. So I guess we'll see.
That's funny.
So, and I guess when it comes to wearables and technology, as I see the community kind of jumping in, I know Steve Case just put in and said he's excited about technology in general. He said Internet of Things is especially exciting, and I agree. I think we talk about Internet of Everything, Internet. What did you call it? Humans as a service is what we talked about last week. HAAS, HAS. But
yeah.
Yeah, so but there's some interesting conversations going on there in the overall conversation. And Rainey, at your friend Rainey just posted. I agree with Dan. I felt Google Glass had too much potential, had too much potential to be intrusive, and that's actually a great. It's almost that question: are they too big to fail? Did they invest too much to fail? But now that they're kind of changing their stat, what do you think about that? What do you think about? I mean, if Google can't make it work, why would someone like Pebble or Wink or some of these other companies think that wearable technology is still going to be the future?
Well, and maybe the real challenge is finding the right wearable, right? I read something yesterday, and this might be a good thing to ping the audience while we're talking, is it's 2017 is there's an actual HR bill in Congress right now about implanting chips in people, trackable chips. And like I said, I mean, it's a start, right? It's for tracing people and census data, and that's kind of what they're starting with. But really with with nanotechnology and how things are getting smaller and how powerful a single chip can be, I mean, in the long run, it's do we need to wear a watch, or do we need to wear a jawbone up to measure our sleep, or are we just going to have some sort of chip that manages our health, that manages our vitals, that manages our whereabouts? At some point, it's crazy because it's emerging, but I mean, that stuff like you'd think in Total Recall days, right? From people that were movie fans, like back in Total Recall days, like
Yep.
you thought was so far in the future, right? And now it's kind of here, and I think that's pretty fascinating. But I think wearables are going to make it, but I think again it's about intrusion. So if they're intrusive, so if you wear a watch and you like technology, then a wearable technology is cool, right? Then a wearable watch that does that is cool. But if you're not the kind that's going to wear a watch, then I don't think because it's suddenly an iWatch makes you any more likely to want to wear a watch. I think, and that's I think the disconnect. A lot of people are like, why don't I just use my phone, right? My phone's going to do everything that my watch does. So why, So I think that's one of the big things is how do you make wearables practical to meet the needs of the audience? I mean, what do you think about that?
No, it's interesting because I mean that was one of the things. Like, I mean, as you can see on my wrist, I have the original iPod Nano watch that Apple came out, and it really was useless. It was an iPod strapped to my wrist, and if I wanted to wear my cables all the way down my sleeve, like I wore it when I played poker because I had a sweatshirt on and I could run my my headphones down to my wrist. But really, it was for me it was I was showing off, a proud geek that I had a iPod attached to my wrist. So my original WearableTech, when I bought the Pebble, which was not this Pebble, I had the first generation Pebble, I remember thinking like, oh man, this is going to be so much different. It's Bluetooth, it's tied to my phone. And all I realized at that time was the software didn't have any customization, so it just sent every notification from my phone to my wrist, which was even more annoying because now instead of my pocket vibrating, my wrist and my pocket was vibrating. So not until Pebble released their most recent update, I guess it was about 8 months ago, when they allow you to customize every single setting. Pebble is now, from a wearable technology perspective, been a real big advantage for me because now I can customize what notifications go on there. So I have people listed as VIP. Daniel, I'll let you into the secret. You're a VIP. So if you text me, it'll actually go to my wrist as well as my phone. So it's almost like a double notification. So if I'm driving, hopefully at a stoplight, I can look at my wrist and see a notification. To me, that's when wearable technology starts to be useful instead of it just being like this original Apple iPod, which was just a device strapped to my wrist.
And now we know, people, by the way, if you text Brian and he doesn't respond, the truth is out. He is ignoring you. Thank you very much.
Very true.
Thank you very much. So, the question, too, though, did kind of come down to like what comes to mind about the Internet of Things. So we've kind of gone into wearables and talked a little bit about, life and intrusion of technology. But talk a little bit about what you think about when you hear Internet of Things, because I think it's got a lot of different meanings to different people.
So I think of Internet of Things, one of the things I talk about a lot is that we have data for everything. Your car is now powered. It gives you, you can pretty much, if you're buying a car 2014 or 2015, which I have yet to own, but I have test driven and rode in, they are giving you all that computer information is actually uploaded into your, to Jiffy Lube or to whoever your mechanic is, and your mechanic is sending email whenever you need an oil change. Like, to me, that's kind of like the Internet of Things. I also think of it as, in my house, and I actually have one of them here, is like I have a device called a Quirky, which is made by Wink, and this device is great because it's a proximity device. So anytime anyone in my house that has a smartphone or an iPod in their pocket and they walk into their room, the lights up ahead automatically turn on because this device senses them in the room. And to me, that's kind of like the Internet of Things. And the big missing part to me is we have all these devices, we have cars, but the only thing we can't replace, we only get one of, is our human body, right? So like I'm wearing the Jawbone Up, and I'm a big fan of this one now because it's giving me like sleep data. It tells me how much REM sleep it have, but it's still missing to me. Like I want more data. Give me more data from my body. So I think Internet of Things and wearables, I want the two worlds to kind of come together and kind of transform the data that I can gather from all these other devices and the data that I can wear on my body. What are your thoughts on Internet of Things?
Well, it sort of brings us to three, right? Because basically you're saying, like, where do we see the trend going now? So let's launch that out for the audience. Where do we see the trend of Internet of Things going? But essentially what I think we're going to see is ubiquity. And again, I love that word, and I know the IT industry loves the word ubiquity, but is between the wearables, the mobile devices, and ourselves, right? It's not going to be an intrusive experience in the sense that we're going to be thinking about having these things that are tracking our lives. We become the ultimate thing or our dishwasher becomes a thing, or our car becomes a thing, and it's reporting, collecting, and creating what I would say is better life experiences. So brands talk about customer experiences, right? And as a customer, that's one part of our life, but our entire life experience becomes better because our car now knows what it needs. It knows when it needs it. It knows how it needs it. And it can say, hey, let's schedule you an appointment. And at some point, it could go beyond just, hey, let's figure out when an appointment could be. And it could say, hey, I'm integrated into your Outlook calendar. I can see that on this day in 2 weeks at noon, you have a free hour that you can bring your car in and get it changed. And by the way, I know that you like to get coffee at that time, so we'll have a cup of coffee ready for you to pick up on the way. And it can sort of merge, right?
Who wouldn't love that? I mean, part of that is if you go to Apple Store today. I mean, I'm an Apple geek. I have not talked or checked out of the store with an Apple employee yet. I use the Apple app. I scan the barcode. I walk right out the front door. Like, to me, it's there's some convenience factor. And as iBeacon comes on, and I have Apple Pay set up, and I keep meeting that I need to go to it's not Sprout, it's the I always call it the organic grocery store. Like, they're the closest ones to me that have Apple Pay. But part of it is that convenience, and also I think our worlds now with Internet of Things are finally, we're willing to openly admit that we're willing to give up some of our privacy and some of our data for some convenience. And I always ask when someone, and I worked in cybersecurity for 9 years, so I can at least talk to it with some credibility of supporting the Department of Defense. I always ask when someone's like, oh my God, you're giving them that data. And I repeat back, what could they possibly do with that data that would harm you? And if you have an answer to that, okay, maybe you shouldn't be giving up that data. But a lot of times, like if they want to know how many times I eat at McDonald's, I'm okay with that. And probably, maybe they can send me the email and say, hey, you want to lose some weight, stop eating, your McDonald's fast food breakfast every morning. Like, that's, like, to me, I'm willing to give up so much data when it comes to those kind of things. I'm not the guy that puts my social security number in a tweet, but I'm willing to go a lot further than most. And I think that's how Internet of Things, we're going to slowly educate the market. We're going to train people on that. Some of this data, I mean, I give my doctor, I was in a doctor's appointment 2 weeks ago, I gave him the output of my Up device, letting him know how often I slept, how many steps I took a day, what food I was eating, and I give him that because I want him to make better decisions on my life with the data that is already available.
Yeah, so I mean, you're basically just talking about the power. I just think, so the potential, though, is just tying it all together, because I think right now it's still very conscious, right? Wearable tech, Internet of Things, we're like conscious, like, oh, this device is connected to the network. Well, yeah, but I mean, in the long run, everything can emit some sort of data. I mean, that's the bottom line. Like, you could put a chip on the side of your house, and it could tell you the temperature of the back wood panel and predict when the wood is going to rot on your house, so that 3 years from now you can start budgeting to save money to potentially reside your house. I mean, it's that crazy, but that is.
Well, I think that this is an interesting one. Mark Rowan put in there, he's like, we're basically talking about Skynet, which I thought was funny. But Nima, in our Twitter chat, we'd like to thank everybody in the Twitter community, and once again our sponsors, IBM and Avnet, for allowing us to have this conversation and talk with you. And I thought Nima had a really good one. He said, I hope it doesn't go as far as using our veins as energy. This artist makes a point, and he has a hyperlink there, and I'll make sure to tweet that out from our different accounts today. But I think that's an interesting one. Like, I mean, how far is too far? For me, I think when we think about, how far do you see the Internet of Things, I don't think of it as veins for energy, but I would be very interested to see, like, when we talk about, water consumption and we're in a drought, like, understanding how much water our body needs and being able to, show per household how much water intake they should have. Like, there's some weird things that I think they could do. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, using veins as energy it's the first time I've heard that, but it's an interesting I say prophecy.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty far out there, but, I'm a big fan of the movie Monsters, Inc. as a father of 2 young girls, and they use screams as energy, and, then they found out it's laughter as energy, but, I mean, we are just big balls of energy, so I'm sure there are some physicists out there, which, by the way, is way above my pay grade, that are probably looking at the potential of everything we do and the energy that it can create. We did have a question from Mike Onsing. And just given the recent news about Apple Pay, What do you think about that? Is that an Internet of Things, or is that just consumer cloud? He asked that, and I just want to kind of ask that as a question. I think a lot of people would be interested, especially because Internet of Things is so convoluted. What do you see that as?
So I like to think of it as it's cloud enabled. So it's cloud enabled in the fact that we could have never made that happen if it wasn't for not only, I mean, we're thinking about both sides here. The consumer as well as the business both have to be cloud enabled to make that happen. So their point of sale machine has to be cloud enabled, connected to the internet to be able to verify the transaction that's happening on a smart device. The person that's checking out has to have a smart device. And I think Vala Afsar tweeted out yesterday afternoon, the percentage of people with smart devices in the world as a whole is still really, really small. So I still think of Apple. I think Apple Pay is a massive disruptor because I'm one that if someone gives me the option to pay with PayPal, I always do it. Like, it's just been a thing for me that I was able to kind of change my transaction from the brick and mortar bank to a more controlled. Like, I don't know about you, Daniel. Do you use the sensor device, the fingerprint reader on your iPhone? So, like, for me, I was never a huge fan of locking my phone and putting in a code every time. But as soon as they released the fingerprint reader, I was like, wow, I feel like I could secure my device without it inconveniencing me. And I think that's also what happens with Apple Pay, because it's almost like the Internet of Things, or I think it's more big data than anything, because now I'm going to get that data of all my transactions in this Apple Pay form, and you can set up notifications. I mean, for me, being able to not only see, like, we both have kids, when my daughters get old enough to be out there making transactions, what are the parent controls going to be able to have on Apple Pay? I think that would be pretty cool, rather than me having to give them a $100 bill or $20 bill or my credit card. I can now monitor, deny transactions via parenting, because my kids, I even brought it in. My 4-year-old has an iPod Touch that, she uses, and she does school games on and all those things. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on, where does Apple Pay convenience fall in line for you?
Well, I mean, the one thing I always have on me is my phone. It's like I could forget my keys, I could forget my wallet, I could forget to put on pants, but I always have my phone. It's like, I'm that statistic. They say, like, 92% of people have their phone within arm's reach 24/7. And literally that's pretty much me. So I see a huge convenience in having that device that can quickly serve as a connector of things. Like I said, I'm a big PayPal user too. It's trusted, it's safe, it's easy, it's convenient, and so I see it as disruptive. I see it as super disruptive, which kind of brings us to an interesting question, right? Because we said that part 3B is,
yep.
So these are a lot of the practical devices, and I think you hit it on the head. Like, cloud-powered and Internet of Things are what's really kind of tying it together to create the experiences. You've got all these devices and we've got all this cloud-powered technology, and putting it together is what sort of creates this experience that we're talking about. But what are the devices that, and let's maybe try to be practical in the next 5 or 10 years, though, Brian, that really aren't even thought of as potentially connected devices that you could see becoming connected devices?
I love the idea of the refrigerator. I think of the refrigerator, like, yes, you can slap a TV on the front of it. Yes, you can put, proximity sensors in the water. But I like the idea of actually, even if it's sensitive spots or weight distribution on different shelves. Like, it was one of the ones that I was thinking about for a while that, like, for me, milk, I have 3 daughters under 5 years old. Milk, and I drink a lot of milk. And milk is just a hot commodity. And for me, I would love to be...
Show your guns.
Yeah, no, I just don't have broken bones. I say I drink a lot of milk, and I've never broken a bone, knock on wood. I have a glass of milk in the morning. I eat cereal. I have a glass of milk at night. But for me, like, I would love to have a shelf where I could put the milk on that shelf, and I was out with my family, and I said, oh man, do we need more milk? I could pull open my device and see, based on weight, how much milk was in that milk container for me to actually decide to go to the grocery store. Even one step further, when I'm at the grocery store, be able to click a button, and it gives me, the amount of ketchup that's in the ketchup bottle. Because I think that's, like, I would love to be able to put a sticker on a certain line, on certain devices, or certain salad dressings, and if the liquid inside was below that sticker line, I should be able to see it on my, in my Evernote when I'm grocery shopping. What are some of the ones that you think of as crazy devices?
A couple of audience contributions. Rachel Miller says humans, which we kind of talked about, and then we're going to kind of get there real soon, Rachel. So just hang tight there. But Bertram Byam Jr. He says it's all fun and games till your sneakers get connected, and I'm laughing because you know what I was about to say. I was about to say your shoes. I know that we're talking about wearable clothing, to measure skin temperature and potentially, but for other reasons. But I'm an athlete. I'm a big kind of a gym rat, but I'm also like to play sports. But your feet, like so much of the energy of your body is in your feet. Like when your feet hurt and your feet are sore, or you're just not feeling it there, it's like draining, right? All the energy, I always say, kind of comes out your feet. And I think we could actually create I think a more productive society by actually measuring the stress levels in people's feet, and then maybe having some sort of ability to, like Dr. Scholl's has those custom foot inserts, but take that to the next level to put the perfect pad to your foot that you're always feel like you're walking on clouds. And if you
Well, I think
think about how powerful
that's awesome. That would be awesome. I mean, I went to the running store. My wife's a runner. I am not a runner. But I am one of those guys that has flat feet, and they always told me I had flat feet. But they never gave me the perfect remedy for it. They tell me, don't buy Nike running shoes, buy, New Balance. And then I buy New Balance, and it's not like they're that much better for, my flat feet. But I think it's an interesting thing, because I also think I would love to know, if you had a pad in your shoe and you were wearing it for a week, and then you were able to take that pad and hook it up to a device, and it would tell you, hey, you're walking too much on your outer edge, or what, for you as a runner, or even weight distribution. If you're doing you're doing bench, or let's say you're even doing squats, and your squats all of a sudden your lower back's hurting, you'd be able to look and see, hey, my feet apparently are too close together or too far apart because this weight distribution is not. I think the feet one's an interesting one. I like. You don't even
really need to connect it because it could wirelessly send out a signal that's just reporting the data back all the time. So
that would be interesting. So I think the next question, this is the one I spurred this whole conversation and got us talking. So you coined it, and I remember you sending me over the document when you were posting the blog post to the I think it was a Raycon blog. The Human Datacenter, and I loved it because we hear about Internet of Everything and all these other ones, but to me the Human Datacenter, especially because I worked in the data center, made so much sense. But for everyone out there, clarify what you meant by the Human Datacenter and give us a little background there, and I'll pull in some community questions and stuff as you're explaining.
We sort of started there and we kind of talked all around it. But the bottom line is the most valuable data out there right now to, as marketers, and let's just talk about as life quality, is still kind of, it's still kind of hidden inside of the human being. So when Rachel said bringing humans online as part of the Internet of Things, we are way more powerful than your refrigerator, right? We are way more powerful than our emotions, our feelings, our physical capabilities, our physiological beings, all the things that our body kind of reports. It reports right now in very subtle ways that we sort of act upon, right? But actually these things are all happening. They're very specific and purposeful. The reason our body tells us we're hot and we need to cool down is because it's for the safety and benefit, right? But even the way our eyes might twinkle and light up when we see a person we really care about, or when we see a thing we really want, right? And then actually being able to decipher the difference between, say, interest and lust, and like when you see an iPhone 6, you lust for it, but when you see a Pebble, you think it's cool. You know what I'm saying? And I think the bottom line is the next big data center is going to be when they figure out a way to extract the emotional, physical, physiological feelings and things that we're thinking about and actually capture that data, and then brands and media and everybody can use it to, one, sell to us, which drives me a little bit crazy, but let's face it, as marketers, I have to appreciate the science there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then also going back to life experience, because like I said, I've been more than willing to give up privacy for convenience in my life, and that's a combination of the way I use social, the way I use search. So I just kind of see in the future that the most powerful data center is going to be us, and of course that's going to be backed by physical servers and rooms full of big fans and noise and cooling systems and everything else. But we're going to be what's reporting to it. And the amount of data we create is going to be, way, way bigger than the amount of data our devices is creating today.
And we had some interesting ones, like so the discussion I'm having there on Twitter as you were going in. I think it was Mike Onsing had brought up like he hates his Bluetooth in his car, and my reply back was I think Bluetooth is the problem. I think Bluetooth, although the newer Bluetooth is a little bit stronger with less glitches, but I think it's about getting Wi-Fi. Like I want my car to be Wi-Fi enabled, not Bluetooth enabled, because Bluetooth still assumes proximity. It assumes two devices talking to each other. Like there's so many things that are
near field.
Yeah, near field, right? And so I mean, we're both geeks when it comes to that. And like I don't wear a Bluetooth earpiece. I had purchased one. Actually, my last company bought me one, but I could never get that thing to work well enough to be happy with. It's almost like Google Glass, but yet, I mean, this Pebble is Bluetooth enabled on my wrist, and I never have problems with it. But my phone is never that far away from my wrist, right? So like my phone, I'm like you. My phone is like I started throwing out gym shorts that didn't have pockets in them because I couldn't carry my phone around even when I was wearing gym shorts. So I think that's a interesting conversation with the Bluetooth. Another one that a couple people put a couple comments. Bertram, I love this because I feel his pain. He said it's becoming a lot of work to be an early adopter today. And as someone that, I mean, for everyone out there that is a Gmail or Google fan, if you heard yesterday, they announced Inbox is one of their new apps that are coming out. And Inbox is, I immediately was like, signed up for the beta, got all excited, and then you just sit around waiting to get this brand new piece of software or app that really none of us really fully know what it does. And it's because change happens. Like I feel like I just installed Mailbox, which was a mail app, and I'm already excited about the next one, and that's in the same month. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I think Bertrand had a really good point there on becoming an early adopter or embracing this new technology. It's a full-time job.
Yeah, but I think I've kind of, in that law of diffusion of innovation, I've kind of hit that second or third realm. There's the people that adopt things way ahead of me now. I've gotten to that point now where I use technology to listen because I want to wait in here and let you be the guinea pig. See, you may think you're on the front curve and you're the first guy that has it, but what I say to myself is you're the guy that gets to deal with all the bull crap. I'm the guy that's going to just buy it and it's going to work because I'm going to have already figured out if it's the right thing for me. But I think he's got a great point. I mean, I think every day we're getting technology flung at us at breakneck pace. Like, try this, try this, try this. Even you, like, sending me things. Look at this, look at this. I got 2 new social networks. Someone told me about this TSU, Sue. A couple weeks ago it was Ello. And I was like, goodbye, Ello, because we're not talking about you anymore. So, I just kind of said, I'm not going to jump into any of this stuff. I'm going to kind of hang out a week or two because that's how fast it happens. And then I'll let you tell me what I want, So I guess I'm easily influenced. I'm the perfect product for influence marketing. But we had another interesting question, and I want to just jump in. Kristen Cardos out on the Twitter stream, she says, does tapping into Human Datacenter open us up to a new kind of hacking and exploration? So I couldn't pass up on this question. So talk about security and breach. So, when you hack a bank system and you steal a password, but what could you actually steal from the mind of a human? And now this is just going, super crazy into predictive analytics, but say we are chipped up and there is data that's being reported. Like, we could actually predict the future and future intent, like Minority Report and stuff style, because now we're inside of the head of people who maybe we're seeing thoughts that they haven't even consciously become aware of. I mean, how crazy is that?
That is crazy, but like, do you remember Demolition Man? When that was, that was Sylvester Stallone. I think it was Wesley Snipes years ago, and I actually had it for like the gaming console in 1997. And I remember that was one of the coolest things. Like, I remember that movie came out, and one of the things in that game is that if you could figure out who the intruder was, you could tap into their brain chip and disable them because you thought they were going to be breaking into your house. And I remember, this is 97, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Well, now, I mean, this is an interesting one that I debated by. I hate keys. I hate physical keys, car keys, house keys, because like you, I just carry my phone everywhere. So I installed in my front door, thank you to the company that sent it to me for free to try, the proximity Bluetooth phone key. So I just go up to when I go up to my front door, it automatically unlocks it if I have my phone. The interesting part of that is it also gives you some really cool things where I can give my maid access during certain hours, then her key doesn't work during the other hours. So I no longer have to worry about, a physical key that I have to go track down for my the guy who stood pets, that takes my dog for a walk. Now I can do everything via. So like there's a little bit of scariness there because I almost feel like I'm controlling it. But I agree with you. It's kind of tricky.
It sort of opens up the doors to, like, yes, you have a system that has a certain added level of security, but now you've also opened it up to people who don't just need to physically steal your key. Like, you used to be scared like someone would steal your physical key and then take your car, right? Yep. But now you're more worried about someone hacking your system and breaking into your house, and knowing, because they're not going to break in when you're there. You don't have to worry about that. They know when you're not there. They know when it's a good time, because once they've hacked you, now they've got all your data. But I think it's just a really interesting question, like, what they're going to be able to report inside of our brains, and what we may not even be conscious of, because not everything that our brains are doing a lot of things that our body isn't necessarily responding to at any given time. It's just a crazy potential. So let's jump in then and let's ask this. We talked about wearable. Now we're talking about the human data center. What is our crowd? What do you guys think in the community? Like, what are the wearable technologies that are going to most enable human data center, in the short and the long run?
So, and this is interesting. We got a couple. Apparently, my comment about I choose my wardrobe based on where I can fit my phone has now spurred an entire conversation of people making some entertaining jokes, and I fully admit and am okay with that. And I just saw Nicole Miller said she's glad she jumped into the conversation for the Demolition Man reference. So Nicole Miller there from Buffer is glad that she jumped in, and there's some cool links being shared in there. I know Hessie Jones just dropped in a link on a couple of cool companies that she says that check out from different things. But one of the wearable technologies that I really like for question 5 there we just sent out to the community, enabling the human data center. I like the closed one. Those of you that watch Shark Tank, I can't get enough Shark Tank. I think it settles my inner person saying, well, I can invent that, or because I'm the tech geek that might be a little bit into social media, I always have my friends or my family saying, Brian, I have the greatest invention ever. And I always tell you, well, what's Shark Tank? Because usually that'll kill those crazy inventions. But Shark Tank, more and more, you're seeing people, I know like it was 2 weeks ago the Shark Tank had, the guy could play drums in his clothes because he had like sensors in his clothes where he could just pat on his clothes. And I thought that was a really neat idea, because I don't really care about playing drums on it, but eventually you could almost understand touch, where what if they put that sensor in football players and you'd be able to see some cool data coming off of the offensive line versus defensive line, and who's the strongest defensive lineman based on the amount of power they put into the offensive lineman when J.J. Watt busts off the block. Like, yeah. That data would be cool.
And that actually is funny you say that, though, because we've crossed that chasm to some extent. Like, they are putting chips in helmets now to better understand, because the concussion issues that are happening. So they want to actually see like the impact and what happens to the brain and what happens to the physical in the inside of the helmet when a concussion takes place. So the funny thing is we're not even that far away. So we're kind of talking about the future, but they're already trying these things. And I think that's what's so crazy about wearables is they're already kind of putting chips in everything. And I think someone said this to me, and I'd like to give credit, but I can't. Someone said to me, sensors are going to be what changes everything. Because a sensor is really a dumb device that, once connected, becomes brutally and incredibly intelligent, right? Because you can put a sensor in, and a sensor can read a temperature, and a sensor can also potentially read, how many pints of blood per second your heart is pumping up. I mean, it could do either or. And they're both important, but some are more intense than others, right?
Right, and I think that's the interesting thing here. I mean, so this device, it's it's a size of a hockey puck, and it's really a device with a sensor, and all it has is a sensor. It has proximity, as in if you walk by, it has like an if this then that app, because it says if someone walks by, do this, do A, B, and C. But that person has to walk by in proximity, and so like I have a light switch that actually doesn't even need me to do it. I can actually do it by if my device walks by. So there's a difference between what if it's human action or if it's a device to device. I mean we already know today there's more devices in the world than there are people, and I'm a great example of that. I talked about it the last couple of weeks on CloudTalk. Is I have 41 active devices hitting my Wi-Fi sensor here in my house, and I have 5 humans and a dog living in my house. So what's the ratio on that when it comes to and that's just connected devices. That's not even including devices that are not connected to my Wi-Fi. So I think that's an interesting one when we're thinking about sensors to give us information. Like devices, computers talking to computers is nothing new. But the fact that we can have a device, I mean, look at this. I'll throw up here my Raspberry Pi. So I have a Raspberry Pi because I'm a computer geek, and this computer, this right here with an HDMI cable coming off of it, has more power than the original iPhone had. It has more power than probably a majority of the laptops are that are going out there when it comes to memory capabilities, and this is a computer. So if I can have a computer like this, and the reason I'm doing that is because my MacBook Pro died, so I feel like now I'm pulling out all of my gadgets to get technology to work, but I can now connect this to my monitor, and I'm going to have more power in this than I'm going to have in a lot of laptops, and look how small that is. I mean, a couple of years from now, we're going to talk about USB devices being, as powerful as a laptop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's jump in then and just kind of let's look at the next question here. Do you think people are going to start to become resistant? And that's kind of what we talk about. We talk about all the intrusion here. We talk about all the potential that people can be, vulnerable, all the amount of data that we can get inside and out of people. Like, are we going to ever start to kind of resist all this connectedness and all this technology? And what needs to happen to kind of avoid that?
Well, it's an interesting conversation, because I think there is a point where we go overboard, and I always like to tell everybody this, and when I teach social media or I talk about something, I always say that I have to train it as if I'm talking to my mom. My mom did not go to school with computers. My mom, she does have an iPhone now. She actually has an iPhone and an iPad. But when I think about wearable technology or I think about device data, I have to be able to train my mom. And if the device or the technology or the data scares my mom, I'm not talking about the ones that, like, if you Google on MD or one of the, what is this symptom I'm having? I think every symptom you're having is leading to some crazy disease that you have to go to the hospital for. So I'm not talking about that paranoia. But for me, like, I love the idea that I use social listening. I want to control my own cloud. Like people today, like, this is a good conversation that we're going to have in the future. Hopefully we're able to get on a couple of the guys from cloud storage companies, because for me, I want to be able to control that data, control where that information's stored, but I don't mind giving it up as long as you tell me what you're doing with my data. And I think that's where it gets scary, because I don't care that Apple gave my data to the U.S. government, me personally, if the U.S. government tells me what they are using it for. But if they're not going to be transparent and tell me what they're using it for, no, they can't have my data. Because how do I know they're not listening in? We always joke, if you bash a Google Hangout on a Google Hangout, all of a sudden you're going to have more Google problems because Google's listening. And do we know that they're not listening? Well, probably not, because this is free. And one of your quotes, Daniel, that I always loved is that it's a freemium. We're using a free service right here. What data are we giving Google about Hangouts? And we have 31 active people watching our Hangout right now. What can they deem from that? Okay, is wearable technology a hot topic because they got 31 people to listen to 2 bald guys talk about this subject? Like, there's some interesting things there.
No, I think that's cool, and I think Nima, and I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, just chimed in. He said, if the connected layer is done right, the technology would sort of just disappear, and I think that's when the resistance will go away. Because my favorite line has always been, right, when the service is free, you're the product. So yep. That's all the social networks, all the free apps we use. If it's free, then you're the product.
That's the quotable right there.
Click and buy. But I think that's really, like, for me, my resistance primarily comes down to disruption of my life. So disruption in technology is cool, but disruption in my life is not. Meaning, if I can't go about my day and do things the way I normally do them, then I would rather not. I would rather not engage in this technology if it doesn't make my life more convenient. Now, behaviorally, social media has changed us, right? Because we didn't do those things, then we started doing those things, and then we did do those things. But I think we're going to see a reversal. I think people are going to start to want to pull back. They don't want to pull back from sharing, and they don't want to pull back from being social. They want to pull back from all the physical activity that it takes to do this. And they just want to sort of experience their life and then kind of have that almost like it's in your mind, right? Kinesis or something. Like, it knows I want to share this, so it's just going to share what I'm doing right now. And I think that's when it truly becomes, like, ubiquitous with our lives.
And we have some interesting debate going on Twitter, and I have to pull these in. Hessie Jones, who I know we're both a fan of, and she does a Millennial Talk series, and one of her recent series was on data, and she posted in there, the government owns your DNA and what they're doing with it, and which I think is a very interesting concept. And then Rainey, your friend Rainey on Twitter, jumped in there and said, we won't know what all our data is being used for, especially if it's being sold. And that's an interesting concept too. And one of the, me working in cybersecurity, and I work for the Department of Defense, and I actually, when I was in Afghanistan the first time, deploying a cybersecurity solution there, and I can actually divulge this because it wasn't something that was classified while I was there, but the act of terrorism, so much of it is to cause panic. And so when you think of a hacker, and I'll put this into cyber terms, most of the time hackers are hacking into something mainly to, less about gaining access to something, more about causing attention or creating panic so that it allows them to do something else. And a great example of that is like, do they really want credit card numbers, or do they want the rest of the information that's tied to the credit card? Because credit cards are going to be disabled, but if they're able to build personas and build information from that, they're getting a lot of information. So for me, part of the scare technique comes back to, what if we're not scared that our data is being used? What are hackers actually going to go after? And to me, one of the biggest concerns for me as someone that is a tech geek is I'm more worried about a hacker hacking our red light, green light system in our major cities. If New York, every light turned green today, and I know that's, there's plenty of movies that showed that, that scares me a heck of a lot more than someone going in there and stealing all of our credit card data. And I guess maybe that's just my thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on that, Dan? Because I think both Rainey and Hessie and Kristen have brought up some interesting concepts on data, DNA, and what the hackers are thinking about.
Well, I mean, I think so long as we continue to put our data out there, there's going to continue to be people that want to steal it. I think some people will do it for sport, and some people do it for profit and gain, right? I always say that the bigger you are, the more vulnerable you probably are, and it's funny because I think last week, I don't know if it was the one last week or this chat we had 2 weeks ago where we sort of talked about the vulnerability and how private cloud versus public cloud, and everyone thinks it's public cloud that makes us vulnerable.
Yeah, that was last week with David Litcham.
Right, but really it's the web that makes us most vulnerable, is because there's always accessibilities and backdoors. What people think is that there's so much sophisticated hacking, but such a large percentage of hacking actually comes down to us just being stupid.
Yes,
right? It's the
insider threat.
Our passwords, right? It's insider threats. It's that someone goes to your web, they steal your business intelligence because they go to your webmail app, they go to your Yahoo page, and then they guess your Yahoo account, and then they test out 5 passwords that are the most common 5 passwords. And if they just do that all day long, they'll get into so many email boxes, right?
Yep.
If you use email boxes, and they search through them.
Yep. No, it's username, reverse username. It's your dog. When I worked at the Pentagon, the #1 way to crack a complex password, look under their keyboard. They put a sticky note under their keyboard with their passwords because they couldn't remember them, because they were being required to do 48 characters, 3 uppercase, 13 lowercase. Well, we figured out by doing some testing that actually the shorter, more complex one that they could actually remember was more secure than the 50 character, and it wasn't because of the hackers, it was because of the users. And I will say it every time, the majority of technology problems, the majority of computer problems are between the chair and the keyboard.
Yeah, so I mean, the bottom line is, while there is always going to be sophisticated hacking efforts, like I said, most of these reaches at these stores have come down to people having little devices nearby, and then when they're vulnerable devices, and they're able to just, when someone swiped the card, grab the data. I mean, that's how a lot of the times it was. It's like near field. I mean, we hear one thing, but the reality is another thing. So, we're getting a little into privacy and security beyond where I even wanted to go with it. So let's go back to a little bit of a fun question to the audience, though. So we talked about, always on, always connected, and resistance. But how much are we really disconnected? So if you were to have to actually answer this question, like, Brian, you are never disconnected because you sleep connected and you actually are taking your data. So 24/7 you're connected. But how many of you actually disconnect for any real period of time in a week where you can truly say, I'm not looking at my devices at all?
That's interesting because I know you remember, but I was everyone talks about digitally disconnecting. So I went on vacation on the most recent holiday up to the Gorge up in Seattle, Washington, to watch a Dave Matthews concert for 3 days, and everyone was telling me I needed to digitally disconnect. So I digitally disconnected as much as I possibly could. My phone is my camera. My phone is also my communication device with my friends that were there with me. So texting them was still being connected, but I wasn't scrolling my feeds, looking at things like that from a social perspective. And what I learned was I lost a lot of experience because I wasn't connected. There was 2 friends of mine that were at the concert that I didn't know they were there because I didn't check Facebook, as crazy as it sounds, because they posted on Facebook that they were there, and if I was normally doing my day-to-day thing, I would have seen they were there, we would have hung out, we would have had fun. So for me, I wrote a blog post, and we posted up there on the Millennial CEO, is I like to do a digital refresh. And I actually did one just recently with iOS 8.1, is that I installed from scratch and only installed the devices, the apps, as I remembered that I needed them. Rather than installing everything and thinking we need all these notifications, I don't need to know every time Groupon has an update to my phone. Like, I don't need to know that. I'll get an email about it. So for me, I talk about refresh, but I love this, this question. I'll pull in some from the audience. And Rainey, I love this one. 90 minutes of hot yoga forces me to disconnect. What about you, Daniel? When you're working out, I know you work out. That's why you're all svelte there. You can keep your guns, not embarrass me. But when you're working out, are you connected? Are you listening to music with a device that's connected where you can get interrupted, or do you make that your time where I can't bother you?
So here's the weird thing about me is I don't have any notifications on any of my devices, but I always am looking. So meaning,
mind blowing.
Yeah, I don't get proactive. Actually, I lied. I get text. That's the only thing I ever see is when someone texts me. But I don't get a note that Facebook has notifications. I just periodically will check into Facebook, check notifications. Twitter, same thing. Because if I did, the thing would be going all the time, all day. Even email, I just, when I'm ready to look, I go into my email box and I pop for new emails. That's just kind of how I am. But the bottom line is when I work out, I am pretty much connected. I usually am using, because I use iTunes Radio, so I've ditched Pandora because that's me. Anything Apple does, I'll do it. I'm, love me or hate me for it. So when I'm working out, if I'm doing something if I'm doing cardio, a lot of times I'll use that as a time to catch up on email. So I'll be on an elliptical. I'll be emailing or responding to stuff. If I'm lifting weights, I'm obviously not one hand like this, pumping iron. But I was actually thinking I play soccer, and that's probably the one time in the week, other than when I'm asleep, that I'm truly, the phone's put away. It's nowhere to be near. And then when I come back to the phone an hour and a half later, I haven't looked at it. I don't know if someone's called me.
It's funny you say that, because I play hockey and I play an adult league, and when my wife was pregnant, I had to take my smartphone onto the bench with me, because if she went into labor, I wanted to be able to get out of my hockey equipment. And I remember thinking of it going, wow, hockey is really the only time I could be disconnected. Now at the same time, if I could be getting my notifications inside my hockey helmet like Google Glass, I might sign up for that. So but that's interesting, because I like, swimming is a big one for me. I have a pool. I love swimming, and I crank the music on, and I always go into I turn my phone into do not disturb, because I don't want to have notifications dinging. And swimming, until my phone, well, we know that Apple's not doing it anytime soon with a waterproof phone. I think that's an interesting one. And we've had some people from the community talk about a couple different things that I thought was interesting. One of them being, I know Mark Longbottom actually brought up the concept that the government, as much as we want to think the government's doing these crazy things with technology, they're often the ones that are behind the times, and the consumers are the ones leading the charge. I can attest to that. That is one of the reasons that I left the industry that I was in, and that's for a whole nother talk. That's a very interesting debate on how they're embracing cloud technology, how they're embracing wearable technology from a government perspective compared to what we're doing today. And another one that came in here that I thought was really good is when you're reading a book. I know, and maybe you're the same way, Daniel. I know a lot of people that refuse to use Kindle or use the apps on their phone to read books because they would be interrupted. And I know my wife was that way, and so I actually had bought her a Kindle. What are those things? Kindle Fire, because she didn't hook it up to Wi-Fi, because she has an iPad, but if her iPad's there, she would go into Pinterest, or she would go into another device. where she said, I want to be disconnected. For me, I tweet when I'm reading. So if I find a great quote, I actually highlight it and have it sent out, social share. So I love reading connected. What are your thoughts on that?
I would actually say that I think most people can't manage the distraction. I blame a good chunk of my self-prescribed attention deficit disorder to all the notifications and just options for content and user-generated content consumption, right? So, I'm in the middle of writing something, and I hear a little ding, and like I said, I don't ever get them forced to my mobile device, but I might have it if Facebook's live in my web, if it's on my web in my browser, it might ding for me if my volume's on, and I always have that urge. Even if I can resist going, I still stop momentarily and think, do I want to go check out what just happened? So, I think we really need to figure out a way to kind of get our work in and yet stay connected. So
actually, this is a funny one. I gotta pull this in. Bruno Wink just tweeted out and said, Brian, I can't wait to the day where you can tweet your dreams. That could be funny. And we had that question earlier about things that you are interesting. As much as it is today with everything that we're sharing socially, and I am the guilty. I'm the 1%er when it comes to the difference. I balance that line of transparency and oversharing. But that's an interesting one. I think that's funny. And the last question here, we have a couple minutes left, and we really appreciate the community. The Twitter stream is flying so fast that Daniel and I are struggling to keep up, and we're actually going to be bringing on a community manager on there to help our Twitter stream so we can engage and be notified about some of these awesome tweets, and we really appreciate you guys. And those of you that have watched our previous 3 weeks, you know that our last question is always to our guests, what's the craziest explanation you've heard for the word cloud? And that stems for all kinds of things, and Daniel and I have had some interesting answers and have some answers ourselves. So for question 8 today, since we're talking wearables and tech, we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to say, what's the coolest or oddest gadget or piece of technology you can't wait to actually exist? And I'll let you answer that first, Daniel, and then I'll throw in some from the community before we head out of here.
Oh man, I didn't know that question was coming, Brian. So
I know I threw it in there at the end. Okay, well I'll give you mine. So Brian Kramer posted the hoverboard Kickstarter that was up there on Facebook just yesterday or day before, and it's the actual hoverboard. And I've always laughed that I am not a skateboarder. I played hockey, I played roller hockey, I wear rollerblades, but I'm not a skateboarder. But I love snowboarding. I love that act. And if I could use a hoverboard and be able to go on walks with my daughters, or going Halloween trick-or-treating, and I could take a hoverboard around, even if it's only 8 inches off the ground and I'm hoverboarding down the street with my kids, to me that's one of the technologies that I would geek out to that all day.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty cool one. I was thinking if they could come up with this thing that had 4 wheels and it had seats in it, and you sat in it, and then you turned a key and it would turn on and it would take you someplace really fast. They could come out with something like that, like some wheels and it would be running on a combustion gas engine. Honestly,
this is a good one. Joe Miller.
I've got nothing, Brian.
Joe Miller put in there from our Twitter. She said a jetpack or a hover car. And then,
Joe's talking my language.
That's a good one. And Bertram put in there, coffee strength is determined based on quality of sleep. That might be my favorite answer I think I've ever heard to that question. Is that they can, if my jawbone told me how much sleep I had, and if I didn't get much sleep, if my Keurig automatically, which my Keurig turns on when I wake up to begin with, if my Keurig was able to adjust the amount of caffeine based on my sleep, man, that would be awesome. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think that's a really good answer there. Let's see what else. We have some other ones there coming in on Twitter, but we're gonna jump in there. We'll make sure to get a recap post out there with all these questions. I really do appreciate everyone for tuning in, listening to us kind of have these conversations. Next week we actually have Louis Columbus joining us as a guest. He'll be talking a little bit of technology, cloud, the future of cloud, especially when we're talking all these startups. I know he writes for Forbes magazines on the cloud startup industry and understanding what is, kind of what, if you guys watched Mark Andreessen's keynote there at Salesforce, he talked about, the bubble versus not the bubble and what technology is actually existing. So, thanks again to IBM and Avnet and our awesome community there on Twitter and those that have been sharing out our content. We are humbled by the amazing numbers and feedback we've been getting from the community to keep this awesomeness going.
Jetpacks away. The goal
Yes.
for our audience out there is watching is one of these times Brian and I are going to fire up the jetpacks and we're going to shoot ourselves right out of this chat. So for now, though, we're still here, no clouds, but we will be back next week to talk cloud. We thank you all. Thank you to our friends, our sponsors, and we'll see you guys later. Have a great day.
Cheers.